am Darius, a Roman Centurion, commander of 100 soldiers, and I serve under the authority of Caesar in this jurisdiction of the Roman Empire. I was assigned to this outpost over 30 years ago when Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. I remember it like it was yesterday. The travelers flooded in from all over, and the streets of Bethlehem were overflowing with people to be counted for the census. I recall that the people could not even find places to sleep. Never did I imagine, after all these years, I would still be here. I have given over 30 years of my life to Caesar, here in this hot, dusty outpost of the Roman Empire. Oh, with these horrible Jews. How I long to be back in glorious Rome instead of Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, where all the Jews come to celebrate their endless festivals and feasts. If that first census wasn't bad enough, the Passover is worse. Oh, the Passover. Every year, the Israelites come from all over Israel to celebrate the Passover, with all their strange traditions and customs, especially the part when the Jews take their best lambs and kill the lambs and put the blood on top and the sides of their doors. What a strange sight. A very strange sight indeed. But let me warn you, do not let the religious celebrations fool you. These people are troublemakers with their endless uprisings and their rebellions against Rome. I have ordered so many crucifixions, I've lost count. But it's their own fault for wanting to defy Rome. But this year's Passover was different. And it still haunts me because there was a man who we crucified who was like no other. His name was Jesus. And he was put on trial during the Passover. See, the religious leaders said that he was guilty of death because he claimed to be the Son of God. Many seemed to believe that he was no ordinary man. I even heard rumors myself that he did many miracles, like feeding thousands of people with very little food, restoring sight to the blind, even hearing to the deaf, and many with all kinds of illnesses were healed, or so they said. And the people seemed to follow him everywhere, and why not? He was doing some amazing things for them. But this made the religious leaders very jealous indeed. But what really made them furious was when this Jesus raised someone from the dead. From the dead. Can you imagine? And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. These leaders wanted to have Jesus arrested and put to death. And they soon discovered that one of his followers, Judas, was willing to betray him for a price. And so on the night of Passover, this traitor led us to where Jesus was so that we could arrest him secretly in the middle of the night. And so with blazing torches and with our weapons drawn, we arrived at the olive grove and found Jesus there. One of Jesus' companions drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. The man was in agonizing pain, and Jesus commanded his follower to put down his sword. And then Jesus did something so amazing, something I've never seen in all my years on the bloody battlefield where these same kind of wounds are inflicted on men. Jesus touched the man's ear, and his ear was healed. It was a miracle. And that night, I knew that the reports about Jesus were true because I saw it with my own eyes. Jesus proved to me that night that he was no ordinary man. And at that point, arresting him seemed quite unjustified. But my allegiance to Rome does not allow for my conflicted opinions to interfere with orders from Caesar. And so we bound Jesus, even though he did not resist us. We took him straight to the house of the high priest for questioning, where he was falsely accused of treason to Rome and for not denying that he was the Son of God. From there, my soldiers took him to the palace of the Roman governor, whose name was Pilate, and then on to King Herod. But both rulers found Jesus innocent of any crimes. Certainly any crimes that warranted the death penalty. He should have been cleared of any charges. In fact, Pontius Pilate was ready to release Jesus, but then he asked the crowds what he should do. And with one voice they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" My soldiers that were guarding Jesus dressed him as a king, and they twisted together a crown of thorns and placed it on his head. And then they took a staff and put it in his right hand, and then they knelt before him, mocking him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." Then they spit on him, and they took the staff and they struck him with it. And after they were done mocking him, they led him away to be crucified, even though Pilate had found no grounds for the death penalty. I remember there were two rebels crucified with Jesus, one on his right and the other on his left. And one of those was hurling insults upon Jesus, and even those who passed by threw their insults at Jesus as well. But unlike these rebels, and unlike those who were passing by, Jesus' words were unlike anything that I've heard from someone being crucified. He said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And for the first time in my life of hating these people, I knew there was something different about Jesus. My soldiers added to his disgrace by gambling for his robe, his last worldly possession. Jesus was literally stripped of all of his dignity. And at the third hour of his crucifixion, I experienced something that day like nothing I've ever seen in all my life. The scene became very eerie, and darkness came over the entire land for 3 hours. And the light from the sun was gone. And when it was near the end of his life, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Father, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And then he said these 3 words, "It is finished." And with those words, he breathed his last. What did Jesus mean when he said it is finished? What was finished? But then, just at that very moment, the earth shook, and the rocks split, and the curtain in the temple tore from top to bottom. And when all this had happened, I was terrified, and I cried out in fear, "Surely this man was indeed the Son of God." But now he was dead. With Pilate's permission, 2 prominent men from Jerusalem asked if they could take Jesus' body to prepare it for burial. The men took his body and wrapped it with strips of linen. And when they were done wrapping him, they placed him in the tomb. And we rolled a large stone over the entrance to the tomb. The next day, we were given strict orders to guard the tomb. See, the religious leaders were afraid that Jesus' disciples might sneak in the middle of the night and steal his body and tell the people that he had been raised from the dead. Raised from the dead, just like Jesus said would happen when he was alive. In all my years, I have never guarded a tomb. The whole thing seemed ridiculous to me. But little did I know what was going to happen on the 3rd day guarding that tomb. There was a violent earthquake, and an angel appeared out of nowhere. And his appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. And he rolled back the stone that was in front of the tomb. And the entrance of the tomb was open. And we were so afraid that our bodies shook with fear. We were so afraid that we trembled to the point that we could no longer move. When we finally came to our senses, we saw 2 of Jesus' followers arrive and go into the tomb, only to discover that it was empty. All they found were the strips of linen that Jesus had been wrapped in. The 2 men left quickly to go back into the city, and we followed on foot to report to the religious leaders what we had seen. This was alarming news indeed. And so the leaders gave us a large sum of money, and they told us that we should not tell people what really happened. And they instructed us that if anyone was to ask us what happened to Jesus' body, we were to tell them the lie that Jesus' disciples came in the night and stole his body away. And that is exactly what we told people. And this lie has been told to this very day. But I'm here to tell you that I know what happened. I was there that night, and I have never seen anything like that in my life. Jesus' disciples did not steal his body. I believe that this man is the Son of God and that he is alive.